HAYASHI. Recorded live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. My name is William Hayashi. I'll be your host for tonight. And our special guest for this December 20th, I guess the last Friday before the Christmas holiday, and then, I guess before Kwanzaa, after Hanukkah, and I'm not exactly sure when Festivus for the rest of us starts, but I'll be looking that up later. Tonight's special guest is Afua Richardson, and she goes by the name of Docta Fu, and she's a writer, vocalist, songwriter, actress, apparently a human beatbox artist, and we'll question that. We'll get some questions about that later. And she's been she shared the stage with Sheila E., Sir Melvin Van Peebles, and Parliament Funkadelic. So welcome to the show. How are you tonight?
Well, thanks for having me. I'm doing fantastic.
And where are you located tonight?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, a little outside of Atlanta.
And how's your weather?
It's unseasonably warm, but I'm really not complaining.
No, well, I mean, it's been crappy up here in Chicago, so I would gladly trade with you. Now, are you a native of the area?
I'm not, actually. I was born and raised in New York City. And I moved down here about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, and most of that time, were you in New York?
Yeah, for the most part. I lived in New York all my life, born and raised.
And how was that for you? Did you like it? Did you not like it? How do you like a bigger city compared to being in Atlanta? Atlanta's kind of big, but still, it's different.
It's sort of a city burb. It's definitely a lot slower, but in a more comfortable way. New York, you don't realize that you're on hustle. you're in hustle mode, and it's like you've fallen into the vein of a giant machine, and you have to continuously move in order to survive. You have to move, you have to produce, you have to make stuff, because there are millions of people commuting into the city at all times. So it makes you very diligent and makes you very resourceful. But because the cost of living is so high, you don't even realize that you're not living. You're just living to work. And so coming to Atlanta.
Saying? Yeah. So that saying is what is you want to live. You're living to work and not working to live. Right.
I had 4 jobs, and I don't know how I was coming up with the money for rent. I think I was, selling organs and regrowing them in the night.
Yeah, I'm selling my genetic material on a regular basis, which actually serves 2 needs at one time. But let's talk about that later. So you're growing up in New York. You're there for all of that time. I'm not really interested in how old you are, but I mean, obviously you went to I want to be polite, but you obviously went to school there, and you spent a fair amount of your life there, at least a bigger proportion of it. In terms of the kinds of creative things that you did, what kinds of things kind of broke out first for you?
I started off playing the flute. I started about 9 years old. I was in band in school, and I was one of the band geeks, the quiet ones who just kind of ghosts around different groups. And by the time I was 11, I played at a citywide ensemble at Carnegie Hall. And I felt so connected to my flute. I was very, very introvert, and I spoke more through my flute than I did to other people. So I played very diligently for years, and then eventually went to LaGuardia High School, which is a performing arts school, and did a few classes undergrad at Juilliard, and realized I didn't want to be a classical musician. This is no offense to anyone who wishes to pursue a career in classical music, but I just felt like it wasn't for me. I just felt like the people who were around me at the time, they didn't love music, and I love music. It's one of those things that saved my life when all the things that were going on in my life were swimming around my head. I could get lost in music, and not even get lost in music, but be found in music. I found my peace and my resolve in being able to create music. And from there, I branched off into doing human beatboxing and singing. I just imitated things. I imitated animals at the zoo. I imitated, infants crying. And then I started imitating singers until eventually I became one.
And well, I mean, it sounds like you were kind of just developing a voice. I'm curious about, when you talk about being an undergrad at Juilliard and that the people around you were not into music. Well, I mean, there's a curiosity that I have about how could that be when you have so many anecdotal stories about how people tried so hard to get in there and they were in love with their music. I mean, did you find that most people were doing it for a reason other than self-fulfillment, or?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
I felt like a lot. I mean, there were very many students who, played very hard, practiced very hard, got in. They're playing with Wynton Marsalis. They're playing with Bradford Marsalis. They're playing with, the upper echelon of musicians. But what I felt being a flute player was this catty, competitive, I'm going to call my mom and tell someone that, tell the conductor that this person doesn't deserve to be first chair. I didn't feel like I was creating music with people who loved music, and a few of the instructors who I encountered, and maybe I jumped the gun too quickly, but they were overly concerned with the politics of music and not creating it. And I wanted to create my own pieces. I wanted to improvise. I wanted to compose, not necessarily play what's already been created. So I felt like I had to kind of branch off on my own.
Yeah, it appears it wasn't feeding you creatively, and it certainly wasn't. They talk about music feeding your soul. If you think the people around you are there for a non-musical results-oriented experience, like you said, I want to be first chair, I don't want to be second chair, and I'm calling my rich mother who endowed, a room here, and I'm going to have her beat up on you. I mean, that does, no, I'm serious, that
it's like
tends
the mom
to take
mafia.
away, it tends to take away from the purism, or the pure part of being an artist, and I would imagine that, apparently it stifled your creativity to the extent that you wanted to get away. But the other thing is, when you look at your accomplishments and you look at the broad range of things that you do, even an environment like Juilliard might have been constricting. It might not have been broad enough. It might not have been stimulating enough to keep you interested. I mean, that's something that we hear more commonly in academic work. Well, he wasn't pushed in his classes, so he got bad grades because he wasn't stimulated enough, whatever. So anyway, you decide that that's not for you. What was like the next step that you took?
Well, addressing what you said before, unfortunately, I feel like our society, when it comes to mainstream academia, it almost stifles creativity. It stifles independent thought. It sort of forces a standard. It's like everyone must wear a size 6 shoe, and it's like, what if I just want to wear socks? And I feel like the instruction and the structure is absolutely valuable, and it's really up to the individual to learn how to learn and learn how to innovate. After after high school, or actually during high school, I started working. Just little odds and ends jobs, office jobs. I made sure whatever office job I took in had a computer so I could teach myself Photoshop. And I started playing the flute for a lot of hip hop bands. I did a lot of like underground hip hop shows and toured around with them. And at some point, I started singing in a girl group. I didn't think it would be very permanent. You know, I was just a background singer, just a fourth wheel, so to speak. And eventually that turned into a duo, and the duo Scarlet Blue, we toured. That's where I got most of my singing experience from. We did a tour of Europe. We sang background for some amazing artists who opened for Alicia Keys and Parliament Funkadelic. And all the while I'm thinking to myself, wow, does anyone realize I have no idea what I'm doing? All these people are trained and they've sung on, all these different stages, and I just, hey, I'm just going to go with it and enjoy the experience. And all the while I was drawing.
Yeah. And how were those people to work with? I mean, were they nurturing of the talent and the art, or was it again maybe more of looking for results-oriented performance where maybe the money, the ticket sales, those sorts of things were more important? I mean, what did you see while you were on the road?
It's a very mixed bag. Art, in addition to being a creative outlet, is in fact a business. There should be a marriage of the two, but a lot of times it's very one-sided, where someone is so in their head about art that they don't know how to handle their business. And then vice versa. There's some people who are so enthralled in the business end that they forget, hey, I draw pictures for a living, or I make music, I make noise, and people like it. So I had a lot of people who were very, very helpful, very experienced in the business, who've worked with just phenomenal, iconic musicians who helped me along, and they understood and they got it. But I felt like at that point in time, I wasn't ready. I wasn't developed. I was still learning. I was still figuring out what it was I had to bring, what it is I want to say, and I'm still figuring that out. But if you go into an industry that's very result-oriented and you don't have an idea of at least the direction that you want to go in, because of their experience, they will try to guide you, perhaps in a way that's not necessarily your vision. And that'll always change. Your vision might not be fully developed or mature. Every idea we have is not the greatest one. Every song we write is not our magnum opus. Everyone has that, oh, this is my super long, epic trilogy story that I've actually written about my life, and it's 20 million episodes long, and I've yet to finish one. Everyone has those. And a lot of these folks have seen, ideas come and go, some with the best of intentions, some with really great budgets crash and fail. So I can understand the need to try and make an idea concise and profitable. But I think what's important is to be honest, be genuine in your creation, and people will feel that, and that is what's profitable.
So, but when I think of what you talked about being in school and about how people will teach a certain way, they'll do a certain thing, and you talk about kind of like the homogenization of the educational process. And we've seen that a lot. I mean, we see it in people being taught to take tests and not necessarily to be good thinkers or good providers or even good communicators. I mean, look at how many people today can't talk to other people. There are people, there are whole swaths of our society who are far more comfortable texting to you than having a conversation with you. So,
yeah, that's
I mean,
unfortunate.
to recognize that in yourself, that was not going to be, the be-all, end-all, and it wasn't feeding you, seems to be have been a pretty good revelation at a pretty young age. About how old were you at that time?
Perhaps about 17 or 18.
Yeah, see, that's. I mean, you should be commended for that. I mean, not a lot of people know what they want to do. I'm like 83 years old, and I still haven't decided what I want to be when I grow up. Well, I figure I'm not in a rush. I don't want to rush and make a bad mistake. But seriously, at 17, you're on the road, you're singing internationally, and then you just mentioned that you also started drawing at that time. Was this kind of like, well, in school, did you draw in school? Was this something brand new to you? Was this something that you were continuing from, an earlier stint in your life? How did that all shake out?
Well, my older sister and my dad definitely play a part in who I am. My older sister is an engineer, but she was always into Hello Kitty, so I drew everything Hello Kitty. And so I really got into Japanese anime, and she does, crafts, and, she, words are not coming very easily to my brain right now. She decorates floral arrangements and things like that. She constructs, these really cool tapestries. She sews, she quilts. She's always making things, and so she always encouraged me to make things. And my dad was an oil painter, but I never got to see him paint. I think that was one of the things that I wish he would do more, but he's a physicist. He was one of those people who always gave me the tools to create, but never wouldn't teach me how to create. He wouldn't tell me what to do. Just say, here's some watercolor, here's some crayons, and I'm going to leave you be. Here's some headphones and some records. Enjoy yourself. So from a very young age, I was able to enjoy being in my own company and create and hold my hairbrush and dance around listening to Lionel Richie and Whitney Houston and Hall & Oates like it was my video.
Okay. But he was at least supportive enough.
Supportive.
Yeah, he was supportive enough that he provided you with kind of like the tools and a hint. I mean, he may not have told you, I want you to draw this, but being a physicist, I'm guessing that was deliberate on his part.
I think so, and I'm very grateful for it. They let me find my own voice. That he gave me the flute, and would give me Sarah Vaughan and a bunch of different classical pieces to listen to, but definitely let me find my own way.
Mm-hmm.
Which is important. People are told all the time what to think, what to listen to. Your ideas about society are associated with these views, this kind of music, that sort of dress. Then people are easily herded, like cattle. Qui bono? To whose benefit? To whose benefit is it that a person is incapable of communicating, incapable of innovating, incapable of thinking outside of the structure of what's been given to them? Well, the people who do create, the people who create these jobs and the workers for them. So when you can innovate, you can create your own job. You create your own employment.
Well,
I was sitting on a...
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say I was sitting on a panel with a bunch of video game creators, and they were telling these students at the Art Institute of Atlanta what they were looking for in an artist. And they said, don't give us the same Don't give us the same work. Don't do a tutorial and do exactly what's there. I want to see what you can do with these tools, not how well you can do what's been told to you. So I feel like with my dad giving me these tools and then leading me to my own devices, he's enabled me to think and create for myself.
Yeah. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the Black Science Fiction Society.com website. This is the December 20th, 2013 edition, and our special guest is Afua Richardson. When you started drawing, and you mentioned you drew the things for your sister, you did the Hello Kitty thing. When do you, about how long did it take you to start kind of creating your own visual universe? When you started drawing things that came from your own imagination rather than, copying things around you.
I think I started writing my own stories when I was 9.
Okay.
I was reading a lot of X-Men, a lot of X Factor. I started reading a lot of Alan Moore, even though I didn't understand what was going on. I was like, something, what? I don't get it, but it's pretty. I started imagining my own universes and writing these things down and taking the different elements around me and drawing it. I don't think I really took myself seriously until maybe I was about 24 when I started doing comics. A friend of mine, Brandon Graham, who's an amazing illustrator, was working at NBM Publishing, and he was moving, and I didn't have a place to stay. And he said, you should take my apartment. I'm moving out. Rent's really cheap. And you should take my old job drawing comics. It was a black and white, 10 pages for every quarter of the year, and that was my first comic. I wrote it and illustrated it and said, well, okay, now I'm published. Well, now that I've gotten over this hurdle, what else can I do?
Yeah. When you started doing that, when he said, it sounds like he kind of just plunked you down into a ready-made situation.
Absolutely. I'm super lucky.
Well, how much, you had to have applied some degree of imagination and originality to it, or did you try to faithfully copy what had gone before? Was this an opportunity for you to kind of branch out and stretch out?
I was already creating stories prior to then. I think around 18 or 19, I started getting black books and sketchbooks and really sketching out my characters, writing out these storylines, story arcs. And once I received that gig, it put the pressure of a deadline on my head. Everything else was, prior to that, was very floaty in my head. Oh, well, I imagine the character going through this. I'm sort of living vicariously through this character. But when I received a job, I had done album covers and different static images prior to that, having taught myself Illustrator and Photoshop at all of these crappy jobs that I had. But it wasn't until that point where the reality sort of stuck in. How fast can I work? How am I going to compose this story, dialogue? How do I make this interesting? The reality of creating a situation for public consumption really locked things into place for me.
Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like the transition from doing creative one-off work. When someone assigns you an album cover, they don't always say, hey, I need it by Tuesday.
Right.
But it sounds very, very much like in this experience, you were finally confronted with the necessity of the business of doing business.
Yes, absolutely. And at that time, I was still singing. I was still doing voice acting work. I was doing a lot of different things at once. Then in 2006, 2005 or so, I went out to San Diego Comic-Con and I walked right up to the Top Cow table and walked over to Mark Silvestri and said, "Hey, man, I love your work. I've loved it for a long time. Do you have anything for sale?" So I bought a big old sketchbook and had him sign it. And I handed him a postcard instead of bringing a giant portfolio, because I think to myself, well, these folks are here to sell books. They're here to sell books.
Mm-hmm.
They're here to connect with fans. Looking at my giant portfolio of work, who has the time for that? I wouldn't want that to be me, is what I was thinking. And so I just handed him a postcard with the better of my images on it, and he recognized one of them. He said, "Hey, that's a Dable Brothers book. I think that just got picked up by Marvel. Did you color this?" And I said, "Well, I penciled, inked, and colored this." And so a year later, I got asked to do a book.
Very cool. Very cool. But see, that, it takes, a lot of people don't realize that the business is three parts. The first part is getting the work done. The second part is being able to get out of your damn chair, okay?
Yes.
and to go someplace. And the third part is marketing. And a lot of creative people have a tough time with marketing. Having a gregarious personality obviously helps. Having confidence obviously helps. But as we go along, year by year by year, it gets harder and harder and harder because, especially in a tightened economy, fewer and fewer people are being offered the opportunity for work that can sustain them. So, I mean, that all speaks well of you. You were very young still at the time, and obviously had the confidence enough to do that.
Oh, not at all.
Well, you
but enough confidence to walk up to him and say, "Hey, I got to try."
Well, I mean, you went out to San Diego. I haven't gone to San Diego, and they got the greatest weather in the world out there. Well, part of it is having this ankle bracelet, but still, I mean, being able to go out and do that, I mean, that's pretty good, and that also speaks well, of being able to put yourself out there. Do you think that maybe you picked up some of that confidence as you were growing up? Was that something that maybe, having the kind of the kind of push but not push that your father provided you with, here, go your own way, do your own thing, figure out your own way. I mean, it sounds like that probably all came together and made you a far more confident person that you might have been otherwise.
I think
that's. Go ahead.
I feel like I was incredibly stubborn, and even though my dad encouraged me in some ways he faced a lot of disappointment. Being a very intelligent black man living in Alabama, who was refused a scholarship for art because of his color.
Yeah.
He would say, "Well, don't get your hopes up about art. You really enjoy biology. You should maybe be a doctor." And I understand that not everyone has the will to push themselves. But what I would do, I felt like in my mind, I saw what it is I wanted to create, but my skills at the time, it just wasn't there yet. I thought to myself, well, I'm a human being, just like this person's a human being. They're not a deity. They're not magic. They are more skilled. They have dedicated more time to their craft, and they're closer to the vision in their head than I am to mine. So how do I get there? How do I close the gap between my vision, the hand, and the paper? And that gap is getting closer for me now, but there's still a lot in my mind that I don't think I'm capable of doing right now. So I have to innovate. It's kind of like being a martial artist, where like, okay, I can't jump up there right now. How do I do this? how do I strengthen my legs? How do I climb this wall? And sometimes to convince the body, you have to convince the mind. So what I would do, because I understood that my skill set wasn't where it needed to be for professional work, and I couldn't afford to go to college, I decided to sort of take on an online personality by the name of Lakota Sue, because I felt like I was being slightly patronized by people, like, oh, your work is so nice for a girl. It's just great. It's great. I was like, what? Jesus, you're talking about me like I'm a kindergartner who's just created a. I'm not handicapped. I'm not disabled,
right,
because I'm a woman drawing. I promise. And there are some handicapped artists who are absolutely amazing.
Sure, but people make these judgments all the time. When you talk about, oh, I'm an illustrator, or I'm an artist and I have a comic, and then they look at you like, oh, but you're a girl.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I mean, there's a lot of that goes on. I mean, we're still very, very sex differentiated in terms of the expectations of the kinds of work that we have. Right. And that's an uphill climb. If you tell them, well, I'm a singer, they go, oh, isn't that precious? What do you sing? Do you sing gospel? Do you sing
exactly.
And so you can't smack them like in the back of their head as they walk by, because people say that that's impolite. But sometimes you got to dislodge that little P in their mind so that it comes out of the little hole so that they can think better. And here's where the problem lies, is that kind of thinking, like you found out in school, has a way of limiting the horizons, limiting the vision, limiting the kinds of things that children think are possible or available to them, because just out of that kind of stupidity.
You're absolutely right.
And so you make this online persona, you start living in the persona, and what were some of the first things that you found out? What did you immediately find out when people could not see you and could not judge you merely by your visual aspect?
I saw that the critique that I received was a lot more concise. There were some people who gave, not very constructive criticism.
Right.
But there were some who saw that my posting regularly, my posting consistently, I started a terrible looking little website just posting whatever I could put up and almost pleading, like, please tell me what I need to work on. What do you see here that I can't? And they would be honest, because they just thought I was dude. And they, they ask, oh, you draw really pretty girls. Do you use your girlfriend as reference? I'm like, ha, no. No, I don't. No, none of that. But it was very honest. It was very much like, hey, you need to consider your perspectives when you're creating a figure. Go and do live drawing. That will create a memory bank of anatomy.
Right.
Some of the other things, like when an object is closer to the viewer, consider using a heavier line weight. Those things will create depth. Just those little things, those little hints and tools, it made me go online and look up different tutorials and teach myself, essentially. And a lot of my friends, like Nelson Blake, who's also at Top Cow right now, we grew up together, and he was very much instrumental in telling it to me straight. But having an online community to sort of keep me in check and keep me continuously trying to improve my craft, not, resting on my laurels.
Well, they were mentoring you. I mean, basically absolutely. What you did was you tapped into a community that despite who you were hidden, they still were generous enough to help mentor you and help you do things. Now, do you think that had they known you were, excuse me for saying this, but
you're
if
fine.
they'd have known, oh, well, you're a girl, do you think that things would have been different? I mean, what were the immediate differences in how you were perceived as, when people assumed that you were a man, as opposed to when people met you and found out that you were a woman?
They got a whole lot nicer. A few people wouldn't. It happens now. Sometimes they don't want to tell me when something's off because they don't want to hurt my feelings, and I can understand that. They'll just like, hey, I'm sorry to have to say this, but please don't be sorry. I critique you all the time. Please tell me. I need it.
Right.
Because I don't want to put things. It's kind of like having, the little nastiness on your face or you've got something wedged in your teeth. Please tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let me go out with the spinach, guys.
Yeah. You walk out of the bathroom and the back of your skirt is tucked into your underwear, into your pantyhose, and nobody would tell you. I hate it when that happens. I wish somebody would tell me every single time, but no, they just want to laugh. Okay, so let's flash forward just a little bit, and now that you do have the identity that you have you've made the marks in, you have the accolades that you have. Okay, you have, people are treating you commiserate to your talent and to your accomplishments. Have you? I mean, do most of them know that nerdy little guy who was looking for mentoring was actually you, or did you just kind of let that go and you're growing your own identity? How's that working out for you?
Well, I used when I started doing comics, I used an alias, and I wrote erotica because that was the comic opportunity to create erotic comics.
Sure.
And so after a while, like when I got my first gig with Marvel, there came a complication with who do we address the check to? How do you want to be
the
addressed on the comic?
Yeah, right.
And I was like, right. I can't use my internet handle.
Right.
That's not going to work. So I started to create this divide between the erotic comics and the mainstream work. I had the opportunity to do a couple of pages in the 24/7 anthology that came out through Image Comics with Adam Hughes on the cover. And so I did that under the alias, and after a while, I was, I think I need to consider using my name, because I would tell people my handle, and they were like, "Oh, are you Native American?" Because it was Lakota Sioux.
Mm-hmm.
And then
sure.
once people started to know, who I was, a lot of these things started to break down. But by then, people were still very honest with me because I was honest with them. And when a lot of these online communities started to break down, I started to branch out into other online communities just as myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I felt like I had a core group of people who could keep me accountable. And then after a while, I wanted to create my own. I felt like I grew so much from having a dojo of artists around me. Say, that's great. Keep doing this. Consider doing that.
Mm-hmm.
That I created Dr. Fu's Lab on Facebook. Because I feel like a lot of artists will have, here is the art of page, and not give anything to their community. And some people feel a little threatened.
In what respect do you mean that?
Well, some people feel a little threatened sharing their techniques.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. If people are, doing artwork takes a lot of energy. And anyone who is an artist absolutely understands what that entails. But to just give art, to me, is not enough. I want to liberate people through the arts. not just here's an image and you draw what you will from it. I want you to make your own image. I want you to be able to be a whole human being. That's what I want to do when I create, because when I was younger, my folks, by the time I was 18 or 19, they kind of went in their two separate directions, and I lived on my own. And there were a lot of things I had to go through. Being a teenager in New York City, sometimes I didn't have a place to stay. Sometimes I couch hopped. Sometimes I slept on the subway. And within that, I thought to myself, my circumstances do not define me. I do not identify with being homeless, with being poor. It's just the situation at the moment. And what enabled me to do that was music and my artwork. So if I can give that to someone else, it's sort of like repaying a debt. It's like, I owe you Coltrane. I owe you Frank Frazetta. I owe you Chris Bachalo and Hiroaki Samura. Like, I owe those people for inspiring me to move forward when options seemed impossible.
Right. Well,
so
one of the things,
someone else.
Yeah, one of the things that my grandmother always said was, with those kind of circumstances, if you're a decent person, you got a good head on your shoulders, and circumstances happen, you're not poor. You're just broke.
Right.
You're not well, no, because poor, at least to me, and this, let a psychologist figure this out about me, whatever. But to me, the dichotomy between poor and broke is I believe is a mental one, is a sociological one, and obviously your financial circumstance, because that's what it was. It was a circumstance. I mean, you're not living on the subway right now. You're not doing this. You're not picking through the garbage. You're not doing a lot of those things.
Right.
But the circumstance was situational. It was not something that defined you. And I mean, look where you are now. I mean, I would imagine you're probably living in a place right now, right? You don't live on the subway. Am I right?
No.
Yeah,
definitely not.
Because you got internet and a phone. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on the show.
I've got cars, 10 cars, silver ones. No.
Let's see. Well, actually, we got Wi-Fi down in our subway too, so
that's
who
cool.
knows? But okay, so you get over that hump. You get over that momentary circumstance. Did it not bring you a certain amount of other kinds of clarity about life, about art? I mean, did you use those circumstances? Did you use those experiences to help bolster your creative bent?
Oh, for sure. It's sort of life experience provides fuel and passion for your artwork. If you know true sorrow, then you know true happiness as well. You have the contrast. You see the best and the worst of humanity. I had the opportunity to eat at a soup kitchen and also perform on the track of the Grand Prix in Monte Carlo. It's
in the same week. I mean, at the same.
No.
I'm not trying to be funny. I mean, you kind of made it like, well, I was in at the Grand Prix, and I had the opportunity to both of these things. I mean, that would be quite the juxtaposition of experience. You know what I'm saying?
Within 5 years time, it enabled me to really appreciate it.
Okay, sure.
And it's that appreciation. Sometimes, it's not a big deal. It's like, yeah, I went here, I went there. I was like, no, I've got to see another part of the world, guys. Do you know how great this is? The world is huge, and there are amazing people and amazing things, and I hope to see more of it one day. But right now, knowing that there's more outside of, Meatloaf Heaven and the Bowery Mission downtown in Manhattan, it provides hope. Yeah. You know how you're traveling somewhere and things seem so much further away when you don't know where they are.
Yeah,
Having
I kind of
traveled,
get that. Yeah.
when you travel outside of it, you expand the parameters of your hope a little bit, because you can see these other destinations. You can see that life is different someplace else, and it can be different for you. So that's what.
It's a positive thing that you've gotten something positive out of that. You know, a lot of people, you know, in some ways that experience or that kind of vision crushes them. And, you know, because they go, oh, you know, look, there's no hope because things are so bad and it's too high a climb to try to get out from under. And I mean, look how many people say, well, my suffering is what made my art as grandiose as it was, or as significant as it was. And some people manage to climb out of it, and some don't. I mean, look at how many comedians. I mean, that's a particularly troubling, I guess, you know, position, or not position, but
craft.
But yeah, because I mean, look how many comedians are able to be as good as they are, because what they do is they see the worst of humanity, but they're able to reconstruct it verbally in a way that brings humor to the worst of circumstance, and yet we find out they had so many demons, you know, going on inside that they eventually just didn't make it. We have artists like that. Although, you know, you look at Van Gogh, he had, you know, he was certifiably depressed and maybe even schizophrenic. But I mean, you know, the cool thing is, if you can take the perspective that you have and turn it around and create something, not necessarily of beauty, but at least of substance, something that other people can appreciate or even understand the commonality of the experience. I mean, that's truly the remarkable part of what art brings to humanity. And so
true.
now you've done the traveling, you've had some very good circumstances and been around some very creative people, and obviously it has benefited your art. You know, not that I want to put you on the spot, and we're going to do a station ID in a couple minutes, but is there a part of you that is paying forward or giving back?
I'm trying to do so in my online community, in my groups. I'll reach out to certain art students and mentor them as well, and I'll do, you know, occasional speaking arrangements and lectures at different colleges and people, and speak to anyone really who wants to learn what I do. I say, hey, you know, I'm not the greatest, but I'll show you what I know, and if that helps you, then fantastic.
Oh, that's
I'm also
great.
working with a few nonprofits, and a lot of it's not art related. There's a foundation called the Well House, and I wish I could help them more. They take women who they assist women who have been either forced or are sex workers, and they offer them job training, safe housing, and a means to get a different job and trying to start over again. So I have a certain print up on my website at afuarichardson.com and say, hey, if you buy this Phoenix print, which is very appropriate for the, you know, sort of death and rebirth of one life to the next of this majestic bird, when they buy that print, I'll donate a big chunk of the proceeds to them, because they also do a lot of art therapies and things like that.
That's great. I mean, and do you find like-minded artists who are also kind of in the same vein as you are in terms of, I mean, I know you had your initial kind of mentors online, and you've followed in the same footsteps, and you're mentoring as well. Is that community? The nice thing about that community is that, you know, it is without boundaries. You know, when you're online, people can be anywhere. let's talk about some of the people. I mean, what kinds of people have you met, and where have you met them? I mean, how many people have actually come to see you at like a convention or something like that, where you've actually found that your fans are, who appreciate you, are happy to come and see you?
I've had quite a few people. I still get amazed. I really do. I still get amazed that people find me, know who I am, and come out to see me. And I'm absolutely appreciative of them every time. There's some amazing folks who are in the group Dr. Fu's Lab on Facebook. And some people will say, hey, I'm bringing my daughters to see you. You're their favorite artist. I'm like, they know who I am? That's amazing. I'm just a girl who sits in a room and draws pictures. That's rad. Like that's amazing to me. That's all I've wanted. I've just wanted to create a connection between me and other people through the artwork. And I think you were speaking before about artists using sorrow to fuel their work. I think there can be a downfall to that as well, because once you become happy, are you able to create? It's really important to maintain a philosophy as well, so that as you move forward and as you find ways to liberate yourself from your sorrows, that your artwork doesn't suffer in the interim.
Sure. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, an online service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. This is the December 20th, 2013 edition, and we're talking with our special guest, Afua Richardson. And one of the things I'd like to ask you about now is, what are some of the current projects you're working on? Obviously, specifically, where people can check out your work. I mean, what are some of the headlining things that you're doing right now?
Oh goodness, I'm finishing up a mini series for Top Cow called Genius. Finally, about a 17-year-old tactical genius who breaks up the gangs in Los Angeles and forms a militia to combat the crooked LAPD. And then it shows the other side of the LAPD, a detective trying to, just bring peace to the streets. So it sort of shows the balance, how some people can get caught in the system and other people who are trying to fix the system from within start to empathize and sympathize with those who are suffering under the Iron Curtain. Mm-hmm. So there's that. Mm-hmm. There's Genius, and I'm trying to finish it up within the next 2 months. I also did some covers for Valiant. There's a Harbinger cover, Valiant Comics, that should be coming out soon. I'm writing a couple of projects myself. I'm going to be working on a creator-owned series for Dark Horse, and there's so many other things. I'm in a band called Waking Astronomer. We just had an amazing show last night. You can go to wakingastronomer.com. And on AfuaRichardson.com, I'll be updating as to what I'm working on, as well as on my Facebook page, Facebook.com/Afua Nyoki Richardson. And I'll have to spell that out because my middle name is Nyoki, and Njoki. Okay.
One of the things that you can do, and I mention this in every show, is for the people, and obviously because we found you through, or because you're a member of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website, is that we always ask that, whether you've been on the show or not, if you're going to have an appearance, if you're going to have something going on, if you're going to have a release, a new product, a new book, comic, or whatever, that you post it up in the events calendar. And one of the nice benefits of that is, like I said, once I get the ankle bracelet off and I can move around and check things out, I'm going to go to, the events calendar and see what may be happening on a given weekend, and maybe find something that I can do. So obviously, if you post up your upcoming appearances and things like that, people will have, the people who are here who have an affinity will be able to check out where you are, and that's your appearances in the band and at these conferences or conventions, all of those different things. I mean, you've got so many irons in the fire that
gotta make sure I don't burn anything.
You provide ample opportunity for people to at least come and support you, which is what we should all be doing. Which brings me kind of to another area.
Mm-hmm.
As a black artist, because we talked a little bit about being a woman, but as a black artist, I mean, what kinds of things, or even if you conflate the two, being a black woman in the comic book field as you are, did you have any kind of sociological hurdles at the beginning that made it difficult for you to get started or get traction, or was that situation that you got dropped into, did that help you kind of sidestep a lot of the problems that somebody just starting out might have had?
When I started doing comics, I went to, or even contemplating doing comics, I would go to a lot of conventions and I would not see very many people who looked like me. But Fortunately for me, I never needed someone to look like me in order for me to think I could do something.
To validate you, right.
Exactly. Besides, running track and seeing Chitara in the Thundercats, like that's all I needed. Like, oh wait, she runs fast. All right, let's do this. I never needed and I guess it was right back to that stubbornness. I said to myself, well, if I really want to do this, they're human. I'm human. I just need to learn how. And certainly, there are some restrictions. Like if I wanted to do ballet, I might not have the physical disposition or the capabilities. There is a respect to the craft that I have, knowing that I can't just jump into something and be good at it right away, which I think frustrates a lot of people. They want to be good right away.
Yeah, but in something like ballet, you have a classic body type that is as ingrained in the art as anything. If you don't have the same body type as the prima ballerinas, people are not. You're not going to be. It's going to be harder.
Yes.
But for something other than that, when you talk about art, art is based upon what you produce. In singing, it's based upon how well you convey the emotion of the song. There are certain absolute values to so many endeavors that you got into, that if you were persistent and you had genuine talent, the expectation is that you will at least do well or well enough. And it sounds like you didn't find really that many roadblocks that stood in your way that were unreasonable or based upon something that was not talent driven. Would that be fair to say?
That's a very fair assessment. I felt like my color and gender beyond critique was not an issue because I wouldn't let it be an issue. Okay. I wanted my work to speak for me, and to do that required my pushing myself to a limit. And I'm not going to say, I don't want to give the impression that I didn't have any doubts. I have doubts all the time. There are plenty of times, several times, during the week where I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm good enough to do this, if I'm fast enough to do this, if I'm consistent enough to do this, am I really good at this? And then I'll shake it off and then just go back to work. Those times come. They come all the time, especially when you're drawing and you're drawing and what you're envisioning isn't coming out right. that just means I have to innovate. I have to move outside of what I'm working on and then come back to it, or go for a run. Just find a way to re-energize my thoughts and shake free of that depression. Because I battled with it for a long time.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're very self-motivated too. In that, you can kind of push. I mean, you know when you may be needing that extra push. I mean, I'm a writer, and I've been very honest with people that I had no idea whether the first novel I wrote was any damn good at all until I saw people do reviews about it. And I think that there's a tendency for creative people to have a certain amount of self-doubt, and I also think that the good part about that self-doubt is that it keeps good creative people, what do they call it? Works in progress. A lot of people don't just sit back and say, well, I've drawn Felix the cat so long and so well, I don't have to worry about having to do it anymore. So, I mean, all of that, I think all of that adds together, and really, how people handle that determines exactly what kind of artist you are and what kind of long-term ethic you have about your art.
Yes, but the great thing about being an artist and being a comic book artist is that your work can speak for you. You don't have to, especially now since there's so many ways to self-publish and get things out to people.
Sure.
I mean, there's so many amazing creators who are Black, who are Asian, who are Southeast Asian. I mean, as far as Black creators, I mean, there's Karan Grant. I mean, they're not an overwhelming amount. There's still a lot of, white folks who draw comics, but I think the problem is a lot of people think that they can't because they're Black, because they're a girl, because they're Asian, whatever it is. Once they get over that mental hurdle and understand that this is an industry that will draw to you if you can draw.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely based on more friendlier relationships than, say, the music industry. You can go to a convention and meet the CEO of a company. You can go to a convention and meet, the owner of these major companies and speak directly to them. What other industry can you do that? You can get critique right from the top.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can utilize that and sort of put your ego to the side a little and say, okay, I'm going to try to take this creative criticism and really pour it into my work and not make excuses, not make I'm Black and I've drawn something, so you should support me. Just do it. If it's not good.
Yep. Yeah, black guilt marketing, as they say. Well, I mean that's what they call it. There are a lot of people out there who will say, well, we have to support Black artists no matter what, no matter whether their art is good, bad, or indifferent. And I see that as a road to perpetuate a whole lot of things that are not good.
Right.
But then you have some people go, oh man, you should never say anything bad about After Earth because it had Will Smith in it, and Will Smith is Black. I'm going to catch some hell about that from people because they already know my opinion. Well, I mean, I'm just saying. But the other thing, the part B to that people don't think about most times is, if somehow we lift up people who are less worthy, what it does is it makes it harder for us to be taken seriously later on.
Right.
And
exactly.
And
to keep the standard low.
Yeah, you put out an After Earth, and the writing is not that good, and maybe the son was not the strongest actor. Whatever criticism you may have, the fact that it didn't make the kind of money that they expected a Will Smith movie to make makes it harder for the next person who wants to have black leads in their movies to get funding. And the same thing for comics. If you have a comic and it's drawn half-ass or it's drawn not well, and I keep forgetting that other people listen to this. Well, no, I'm sitting in my office, and I talk the way I talk in my office. But seriously, I mean, if the art is not good and people are expected to support it merely because it was done by you and you happen to be darker than Harry Belafonte, that doesn't I don't think that helps.
Right.
So, I mean, the fact that and the ugly side of all of that is that as black creatives and even black professionals, many of us are trained, are conditioned, are used to doing twice as much to get half the credit because that's just the way it is. And it's a double-edged sword. You want to support people who are trying, but if they're not quite there, you don't want to hold them up for other people to look at and say, "Oh, hey, look how good this is," when it's really not good. Fortunately, you don't suffer from any of that, man. I look at your art and I'm amazed.
Oh, thank you so much. I have so
next
much
time
work to do.
No, I'm serious. I mean, when my third book comes out, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to say, "Hey, remember that guy who interviewed you on that show? He needs a cover." But I'm serious. I mean, that's the other thing that hopefully you see some synergy between, very good artists, black artists, what have you, that promotes the quality of the art and also allows people who might not get the same kind of view to get to be seen, in a venue that you normally would not have seen them because it's tough to get into or because you don't get that cross-pollination of support.
Right. And one thing I think people may forget is that if people are talking about, there's a misrepresentation of black people in the media, there's not enough black leads, there's not enough this, there's not enough that. Make it yourself.
Yeah.
We don't need you don't need someone else telling your story and then complaining that they don't get it right.
And quit waiting for permission to tell your story.
Yes, exactly. Don't settle for it. If you want to be treated equally, hold your own work and others to that same standard. That's how you get, that's how you get the support. That's how you get the accolades. There will always be racists. There will always be people who feel that, a black lead is not as strong. They're working from some old, outdated model, and they assume that books that are predominantly black populated, if you will, black themed, are only for black people. But think about it, if you start to identify yourself with just being black, instead of being a sci-fi writer, instead of being, just what it is that you create, then that's what you'll be identified as. And you'll sort of be pushed into this little box.
You'll be pigeonholed.
Absolutely. Think about anime. It has a different name. It's not just yes, it is, very specific to Japan. But it's anime. It's all inclusive.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so
I mean,
once
that was
people start,
go
it's
ahead.
like hip hop. It's kind of like hip hop. Hip hop was in its beginning stages. It didn't matter, if you were from Laos or if you were from Canada. If you could rhyme, if you could scratch, if you could, throw up some pain, if you could dance, and you brought it to the circle, then you were treated with respect.
Unless your name was Vanilla Ice. Well, and to that end, you know, I don't want to be considered like a black science fiction writer. I would love. I mean, you know, what I'm shooting for is to be considered a science fiction writer. And you know, I cheated because I made sure I had a Japanese last name to kind of throw everybody off. But you're right. The art should stand alone. The quality should stand alone, regardless of the color of the creator. You know, you go back. I mean, if you want to get, you know, really, I don't know, official or whatever about it, but you know, you remember that Martin Luther King Jr. said, you know, we look for the time when people are judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And in terms of commercial endeavor, I mean, everybody would like to have mainstream accolades for what they do. And you know, there are hurdles. Yes, there are hurdles, but there are hurdles to get over, not hurdles to stop you in your tracks while you look over the hurdle going, man, I wish I was on the other side. And you know, I look at everything that you've done, and like I said, I love your artwork. I haven't heard you sing or anything, and I'm not going to make you sing on the radio because that's just bad. But you know, you are somebody for whom hurdles don't matter, and that's and not in a way that, well, I'm just going to do it because of X, Y, or Z. You do it because you love it and because it's something that feeds your soul. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Have you worked much with children yet?
Not so much. I would like to more. Most of the work that I've done with children has been revolved around singing. But when I get the opportunity to, I'd like to reach out to some younger kids. It's been more on an individual basis, but they're like little sponges. You can just give them a small tool, and they will take it and turn it into origami. They'll expand upon it, and it's just amazing it's amazing how stifled I think a lot of people are when it comes to art. They assume that art is a right brain function. They assume that if you're in your right brain, you can't be an academic, you can't be this or that. And when you think about those who were really successful artists, who were really successful anything, a lot of them were innovative. A lot of them, you know, went outside of the parameters. You look at, you know, the greats, like singing-wise, Nat King Cole. Why was he so amazing? I mean, he had a beautiful timbre to his voice, but he was a piano player. Right.
Or how about somebody as unusual? I mean, just because of the whole Ryan O'Neal, Farrah Fawcett thing, but look at the art of Andy Warhol.
Right.
Before he did what he did, I mean, he pretty much created a whole new paradigm, and we still look at it and laud it, you know, and you know, you talk about black. Look at I mean, you want to talk about a guy with a bad attitude, but obviously he had more creativity than you know, any 10 people. Look at Miles Davis. You know, we have a history of creativity that is, I don't want to say it's unmatched, but it certainly can parallel any other, you know, if you have to separate out a group of creatives, any other creatives out there. And so many people of color, you know, of all different stripes have brought forth such explosions of high concept art. And when I say high concept art, I don't mean like, you know, go to art school and, you know, go to the Met and you have to put on a tuxedo to see it. But I mean high concept in that something that nobody else has ever seen before, something that makes people excited. And when you have that level of artistry, not only are you able to create and are you able to do your own art, but there's that whole inspiration thing for other people who go, I'll be damned, look at that. I never would have thought to do that. And it ends up inspiring somebody to do something that they may never have thought of before.
Yeah, that reminds me of the time I got to work with Melvin Van Peebles, and he's very much a polymath. He's one of those people who are just, even now, 80, 83, 84 years old, so driven, so determined, so focused. It's absolutely amazing, just his resolve. He was a World War II pilot and decided that he didn't want to be in the military anymore because his cargo was the atom bomb. And, he was stationed in France, and he wanted to do a film. And so the first time he stood behind the camera was on the set of his new film.
Right.
And he won several awards for it. And at the time in America, there were no films with black leads that were major films.
Right.
Everything was sort of a B film, or those films that they showed as people were piling in. And every actor that was black was, either in a cheetah print loincloth or they were a butler.
Or a butler, or a maid, or a slave.
Right, exactly. So people identified with these things according to the media that they ingested, which was a larger window to the world than their interactions with actual people. To know that there were people like a Melvin Van Peebles. And so he came out with the Sweet Badass Song, and here's a movie of a man who is walking down the street, sees two cops beating up a black guy, and he's like, hey man, cut it out, and they get into an altercation, and he accidentally kills the cops. And so he's on the run for the entire film. And they didn't know that he was black. They didn't know. They had no idea that the director and creator and the star of the film was black, and until they were about to roll it. And he said, well, okay, I'm going to level with you. If you let me put this out as a front row film, and if it does well, then, this, and this. And if not, I'll never make another film. And I think it was something like that. I don't want to misspeak, but it was along those lines. And it did so well that it gave birth to Shaft and all of these other films that wanted that same essence, but wanted to take out the politics. And he didn't care. He was just like, hey, you know what? If it means that black actors now have the opportunity to star in films more than being butlers, then that's great. He's like, but I'm not going to...
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, he would just say, like, I don't want to make another film about how the man is keeping me down. Like, I don't need them to have the satisfaction that what they're doing is working.
Right. And even, Hollywood still marginalized the fact that those films were successful, and that they had an audience by calling them blaxploitation films.
Right.
Like they were something lesser than a movie.
Right.
Like it wasn't a real movie. It's not a real movie. It's a blaxploitation film.
Yes,
and that's
created by black people to exploit black people.
Right. And the fact is, folks got paid. I mean, and just as an aside, I look at Shaft as a seminal movie. Well, it wasn't seminal because Sweetback's Badass Song was the seminal movie of the genre. But you look at the quality of Shaft, and people can go, well, the cinematography is dated, and the lighting or this or that. But I will hold up that soundtrack that Isaac Hayes did for Shaft as still today the preeminent soundtrack for any movie that has ever been done. And people can argue with me about that, but you know what? They don't know very much. So because but see again, it was a black film, and I don't remember if Isaac Hayes even got a nomination. I'm going to have to go look that up when I have
I'm not
two
sure.
other hands and one more screen. But you know, the fact of the matter is, people are people. And, you know, when you want to talk about, oh, well, it was a black film, or it was this, or it was that. No, it was a film. It was a movie. It was entertainment. And that's one of the reasons why I miss Gene Siskel, you know, that he died so quickly, so early. Because one of the things that he was very, very good at was pointing out to people, regardless of color, regardless of the content of the film, whether or not it was going to be entertaining. And, you know, a lot of people won't use that as the yardstick. So now, let me ask, have you done any work in film yet?
No, not yet. I've had a few songs placed in soundtracks, and I did a few Broadway and off-Broadway productions, very small things. One with Melvin Van Peebles. It was like a 3-man show.
Wait, were you in the show?
Yeah, I was in the show. He was sort of narrating.
Be a 3-man show. It's got to be like a 2-man and 1-woman show or something. For God's sake.
A 3-human show.
Okay.
It was called Briar Soul, and Melvin was sort of narrating, and I had to play 6 characters.
Well, that's
6 different characters coming in and out. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Is that something anybody can see? Is that recorded anywhere or on DVD or anything, or was that just the stage play?
I think it was just the stage play. There were a few photos from it, but I think we were hoping that it went on to something bigger, and I ended up moving to Atlanta kind of in the middle of that production, so it didn't really move forward from there. But we're still in touch. I saw Melvin a couple of months ago. He's his regular spry self, running, 15 miles a day, like the crazy man he is. He's amazing. He's absolutely amazing. Well, it's people like that you remind yourself. It helps to ground you. It helps you say, okay. People get a little anxious around 30, 40, thinking, oh man, I'm over the hill now. I haven't created this or that. He never stops. He keeps creating. He doesn't care. He's like, as long as I'm alive, I will create. And I want to do the same thing.
Yeah, I worked with somebody here in Chicago when he did a play, Oscar Brown Jr., and he, of course, knew Melvin, and one of the things that he said about him was that he was going to be one of those people that you're going to have to shoot on Judgment Day, because he ain't going. Which at the time, that was the first time I ever heard that, and I mean I laughed for a good long time. Hang on a second. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. This is the December 20th, 2013 edition, and we're talking to Afua Richardson, New Yorker, who has immigrated to Atlanta, which I hear is experiencing some unseasonably warm weather, just in time for the holiday.
Yeah.
Will you be traveling during the holiday, or do you celebrate there? Are you coming back home? What's going to go on for you?
I think it's going to be low key. I've got a lot of stuff to work on. I've got another show January 30th in Atlanta, in East Atlanta Village, with Waking Astronomer. I need to finish up Genius. I had a offer with Boom Studios to do a short 8-pager, possibly, with Clive Barker.
Okay.
We're like just doing a short Hellraiser comic, and we'll see. Like I don't really like to talk about things until they're finished and in stone, but we're friends.
Right.
So I've got a lot of things I need to finish up, and I might do a Kickstarter for a comic book / music project. So I've got a lot of things to organize and a lot of things to kind of get together. So I'll just be sending out cards and.
Yeah. Have you used Kickstarter before?
I haven't.
There's a very good a brief article on things to look out for when you use Kickstarter or any of these crowdsourcing things on Black Science Fiction Society website. It was written by Wolfgang Porter, and one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, that somebody's going, don't use Kickstarter, use Indiegogo. Well, that is true, because if you don't reach your goal, at least with Indiegogo, you get your money.
Yes, that is
but
very
one
true.
of the things is when you do use these crowdsourcing services, one of the things to look out for is the fact that every single donation that's made to you is, the person who makes it to you becomes a stockholder in whatever venture you're doing. And a lot of people don't realize that you're looking at, anyway, just read the thing, just a little word of wise to anybody who does use any crowdsourcing, that there are certain IRS expectations that you should look out for, so that they don't bite you in the butt. But that's the other thing. It sounds like you're very good about the business of doing business. Let's break it down between the kind of creative things that you do and then actually maintaining the business. I mean, what do you think in terms of time your split is? Do you spend it 50-50? How does it work out for you, especially given how many things that you do?
I think I spend a lot more time drawing than I do creating music.
Okay.
Just because it's very time consuming, and with music, I feel like because I've had more formal training in music, I can, and the musicians that I'm playing with are absolutely amazing. I feel so lucky that I can just go meet up with them, we'll vibe, and we'll write a song in a night, and then perfect it, and then go on. So that I can do once or twice a week, and then spend the rest of the time drawing. And other things, sort of pile in, other opportunities pour in the meantime. But I'm really trying to focus on those two right now, and then let the other things, come in later. It's really good to know your capabilities and how to properly balance your time, and then juggle all the other things in the meantime. Because sometimes you'll work on a project and people won't pay you on time. And so in certain instances, when I don't get paid on time, I have to stop and then do another job, because I can't afford to continue working on this project if, I have no lights. So what I'm attempting to do is create a lot of different things right now, and then launch them one after the other to create a residual income, so that what I'm working on, I am not depending on.
Right. Kind of getting past the hand-to-mouth existence.
Absolutely. And that's slowly coming. That's just something that I'm sorting out right now, and I'm just trying to be a smarter artist, work smarter and harder, but more smarter.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like you're still able to spend more time on the creative side than the business side. Is that fair?
Thankfully, I mean, throughout the day, I'm constantly emailing it and speaking to clients and working things out. And if you have a very good idea of what it is that you want, what it is you expect, and you communicate with your client, they'll be a lot less, it won't feel so headachy. If you kind of have, okay, you want me to do this, please give me these details. Do you want it in color? When is your deadline? What sort of expectations do you have? Do you have an example already of something that you like? Asking these questions in the beginning, and then stating, okay, now that we have an understanding, I'm going to give you an invoice, and I'm going to give you a quote, and that I'm going to write down everything that this includes. So for this logo, it will be this much, and that will include this many rounds of layouts and drafts, or sometimes they have their own contractor. But just having that understanding in the very beginning eliminates the, this isn't what I want, you have to start all over again when you were going by there. Yeah.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't understand. A lot of creatives. I don't want to, and I'm not coming down on creatives, but
oh no, nobody told them.
Yeah, they creative people have a tendency to think a little differently than other folks. I think that would be fair to say. And the part about being able to do business is so essential. As much as you want to be a creative, to be thought of as a creative soul, a writer, an artist, a musician, or whatever, ultimately it's still a business. It's still about the business of monetizing whatever your creativity is able to generate.
Right. And if you want respect and to be respected, you first have to respect yourself and establish your business parameters. Know how much you want to make per hour. Understanding what the industry standards are, which are always changing.
Right.
But you can, even just having something in an email and saying, okay, this is what we agreed to. Now I'm going to put it on paper and send it to you. I don't start work until I have a deposit. You don't get the finals until I have the remaining balance.
Right.
The deposit is non-refundable. There is a kill fee. Understanding those things, because things can happen. And you'll start working on a project, and, maybe the person loses their job, and they can't continue to pay you. And you have to make a choice, like, okay, are you going to continue to work? Can you stop? Are you going to set parameters so that if they decide, hey, I'm sorry, what we're creating with you isn't working out, you have to state, okay, so you also cannot use the work that I've created for you without paying me the rest of the fee.
Right.
And just understanding all of those things and putting it very concisely, like, hey, at the point of the final invoice, you have 30 days to pay the remaining balance, or there will be a late fee of 10% added to the total amount. Just all of those little annoying things that you just have to kind of establish, because it is, in fact, a business. Treat your artwork or your music or whatever it is like a contractor would building a house. You need materials, you need time, and sometimes as things are going along, as you go from the development stage to the approval process, once you move on past the approval process, in order for them to go back to sketches, you have to renegotiate and set that, down to like, oh, hey, I'm really sorry. We've already moved on to vectors. I've already started finalizing this, and you're coming with another idea. This is how much of the fee includes the development. So we're going to have to, I'm going to have to recharge you for that, because it is your time. It is, your lifeblood. Even though you're creating and you're drawing pictures, unfortunately, people have the assumption that you're just, oh, this is fun for you. It's like I'm paying you to skip rope. It's like, yeah, this is an enjoyable job, but it is still a job.
Yeah.
And it's not just my scribbling something down in an hour. It's an hour plus years of experience.
That's exactly it. And this wasn't the reason why we broke up, but my ex-wife used to always kind of look into the study where I was working on the computer and said, "Are you still playing on the computer?"
Wow.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm single now. But again, everybody has to be on the same page about it being a business and about the business of doing business. The other thing that a lot of people who start up don't realize is that if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Because the moment you said, "But I thought you said," you've pretty much lost the argument. Or you told me. Well, where is it in writing? Where is it?
Right.
Where I don't remember that. And
right.
They could be lying. They could legitimately not remember.
Right.
So that's pretty cool.
I really like working out things in email because you can refer back to it.
Right. You've got a chain of correspondence.
Yes.
And the other thing about email is the immediacy. Because, remember back when you used to have to do change orders and put in the mail or fax or this or that. That was a pain. I'm not going to lie about that. Trying to keep track of all of the the things that would go on. Al has an ex-wife who also, I'm looking at the chat room, he had an ex-wife who did the same thing. Yeah, so we got about 15 minutes here, maybe a little bit more because we started a few minutes late. Looking down the road, maybe over the next 5 years and the next 10 years, what kinds of things do you think that you might be doing? Some may be different, some may be the same, some, but where do you see yourself, 10 years down the road, in terms of not only artistic endeavor, but maybe even in terms of you as a business?
Well, I definitely want to expand. I want to start creating a lot of multimedia projects. I also want to create a series of online classes because it'll make sharing a lot of my techniques a lot more concise. And a lot of it I'll probably give away for free, and maybe the juicier bits I'll charge them tiny fee just for the time it takes to create video. But I want to, I don't know, I want to start getting back into I call it sort of a renaissance. I want to kind of bring back a consciousness to artwork. And I know that's going to take a lot of time, but I want these different fields of creativity to integrate. The sciences, geology, considering ancient societies, and a lot of things are coming to the surface that our society is a lot older than what we think it might be. We have 5,000 years of recorded history, 5,000 to 6,000 years, but the oldest modern human skeleton is maybe 200,000. Like 200,000 years old?
No, you're right. They just, as a matter of fact, they just found a bone, a Neanderthal bone, which indicated that unfortunately Neanderthals were kind of messing around with us and interbreeding and stuff. But I mean, how do you see that reintegration or that fusion of that kind of historical, historical, human record, and then how do you see integrating that into art? When we, what do we have in terms of art that's older? We have cave drawings, we have, things like that. How's your fusion going to work?
Well, I've been checking out this website, sacredgeometryinternational.com, and there's a scholar named Randall Carlson who is a builder and an architect, but he's also a Mason, which gets a lot of conspiracies drawn up about them. But he has gone out to these different sites and these different temples and these different archaeological sites, and he's collected this data. And there's a sacred canon of numbers that are embedded within the stones and the location and the different architecture inscribed within not only these buildings, but in some of the Renaissance paintings, in a lot of like wonders of the world that we're still scratching our heads over. There's a lot of art that has this harmony and a balance to it, and as you integrate these numbers which repeat themselves in not only time and space and in nature, like the phi spiral and the golden section, which is the spiral is present in our fingertips and in hurricanes and in the Mona Lisa's face. As you utilize the numbers that are present in nature, in the things that you create, you start to create a resonance between the people who receive it and the artwork itself. And that marriage of the left and right brain in understanding the science of how we're created, if you start to put together pieces of myth and music and physics and all of these things that are so divided and separated, and you kind of start to innovate. You start to put together things and resolve things within yourself. And at least that's what's happened for me. When I start putting together a lot of these things, it almost starts to unravel a lot of things within your life, and that's been really liberating for me. I look at the old Pythagorean schools, and they had, 7 liberal arts, and they had this trivium method of education where you remove any contradictions, you do your grammar first and find out everything you can about something, and then you, again, remove the contradictions, and then you teach it. And if you apply that to artwork, you'll find that a lot of the things that you think that you know, or a lot of the things that you hold to be absolutely true, don't have a very strong foundation. And if people did that, not only would artwork improve, but their outlook on life, their political decisions, their dietary decisions, just the things that they do on a day-to-day basis will start to break down as you integrate the math of life into your day-to-day process. And I know that sounds a little out there and kind of all over the place, but that's sort of what I'm seeing. There's an author by the name of Graham Hancock who wrote Fingerprints of the Gods. He's writing a new book, Magi of the Gods, and he's talking about all of these different things, how ancient societies would embed these numbers in artwork in order to send a message to, future societies, or to help people remember, and unraveling the mysteries of life, or even just containing a philosophy within your artwork. That's a constant source of inspiration. Instead of just creating a story for creation's sake, looking at the stories and the different things that are created that we consider to be iconic and timeless. Like Star Wars. Why is Star Wars so popular? It's the same relationships. Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia have the same relationship between Horus and Isis. You're calling on these ancient archetypes that speak to you in a way that you just, why is this resonating so well? Why is Superman loved by so many people? It's so similar to the idea of Christ. He's 33, he's powered by the sun. Ka-El so loved the world, and that doesn't necessarily mean that he's that what you believe in, or you have to believe in Jesus in order to love Superman. Right. But calling on these higher things.
We have ample evidence, through the years, and when I say through the years, I mean tens of thousands of years, that man's been a highly complex thinker for far longer than we give the race, the breed, the credit for, and you see that in math. You see, as you've already mentioned. I just read somewhere just in the last few days about the fact that I want to say Polynesians, but I don't trust my memory, had invented base 2 and were doing math in base 2 so many years ago that people are just astounded, and then for me, something as simple as how the hell did they build the pyramids and build them so perfectly?
Jeez.
Just look at that. Just look at something like that. How do they do that? Okay, yeah, they use slaves, but you know what?
I don't think so.
If I was out in the sun and they were telling me to build a very large pyramid like that, I just don't. So there is much to be said about the confluence of human endeavor and art, because even in physics there's art. There's symmetry in particle matter. There's symmetry in so many things,
Right.
And then of course, when you take the mathematical basis for our entire existence, there's so many things where you can't have an existence without math. I mean, and
Right.
to the extent where somebody had to sit down and go, damn it, this is not working out. Let me invent the number 0. Oh, and now it all works out. So, I mean,
right.
I can see how that would draw a creative in the way that you would want to figure out what the confluence of that which is fundamental and that which is artistic and be able to express that. So when you look in terms of your future art and you look at being able to render or produce art that kind of meets this criteria, you're obviously excited about it. When you think in terms of doing it, the part that I wonder about is where are you going to take that? Is that something that you're going to try to bring to maybe education, so that maybe if kids understand better what their origins are, they won't be so damn stupid about their present.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry.
That's why I want to go
apologize.
to online. It's okay. I bring out the rude in people.
No, I didn't mean to be rude, but I mean, you look at kids today and they are cast adrift. You look here in Chicago. I mentioned this 2 weeks ago. Here in Chicago, we've got a mayor who is convinced that keeping somebody in a crappy school situation for more hours is going to make them learn more. Back when I went to school here in Chicago, and I've got the finest 6th grade education you can get from a public school. When I was going to school, we were in school until 2:45 or 3:15, and that was it. And our test scores are 25% higher back then than the test scores of the current crop of kids coming out of school. So to tell me that to stick them in school for an extra 2 hours a day is somehow going to make them brilliant or make them perform better doesn't make any sense. But
it makes them cattle for the state.
Yeah, and the other thing is we've taken away art from the kids.
Right.
Kids who have art and music perform better in life. Kids who have art and musical training are smarter. They have better test scores. They're better adjusted. They're not out there slinging bullets and doing as many drugs. And this is the first place where we cut money. So, I see a lot of offshoots to what you want to do and the excitement you have in terms of finding the confluence of, somebody put metaphysical, but the metaphysical origins of art and science. Art and science didn't used to be separate disciplines.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. When you look at Da Vinci, look at Dali, like when you look at their sketches, Da Vinci was a metallurgist. He was a sculptor. He was a mathematician, a painter. Incorporating those things into the work and I don't know physics as well as I should, and I'm sort of taking a crash course, which is interesting because my dad is a physicist. But just becoming reacquainted with the sciences has changed my work dramatically, and I want that for other people. I don't want them to be so divorced. Like, think about the reaction people have to math.
Right.
They're just like, you're either really, really good at math and you're probably an accountant, or you're just like, you kind of shrink away from it a little bit. Why is that? Because you're just given an abstract teaching of math. There's no physical application. And my dad is also a teacher, so he would create these scenarios. He would have the kids build different things explaining the concepts. Like, this is how we measure inertia here. You're going to have a literal understanding of these quantities instead of just memorize this for an hour or half an hour. A bell rings like you're a Pavlovian dog, and you go to the next class. You take a test that's all standardized. You might need a different, means of learning math, but you don't get that. All right, you work at McDonald's and you work at NASA.
Right.
You know, it's just hurting people and separating them instead of really nurturing what it is that's inside of them. And that's something that I really want to try and help bring back, that if you're an artist, don't just submerge yourself in art. You'll start to stir the pot of your inspiration by innovating and going outside of art and pulling it into it. And that's an amazing way for people to learn.
Yeah.
Most people learn their alphabet by singing. So the music and art and color and those things are ways that we can evolve. We can essentially evolve because we need it. We need to start paying attention to what's going on in our lives. We need to start asking bigger questions, not, what's going on the next reality show, but what's going on in our reality.
Yeah, and the other part of that is somehow we have to be able to regain, our standards in terms of education. I mean, right now we teach to tests that essentially make our kids just smart enough to be able to make change at McDonald's, and that's just that's not worthy.
It's not.
A friend of mine came over, much younger. This guy's like 20, maybe 25 years younger than me, and he, I just cleaned out some boxes, and he picked up my slide rule. Okay,
mm-hmm.
And he said, how come your ruler is broken? And I was speechless. I mean, he didn't even know what a slide rule was, I got nothing.
It's really disappointing, but it's also I feel like it's intentional. And here comes conspiracy gal. But I think
that was Richard Nixon's doing.
Yeah, the Prussian style of education was basically made to convince Prussian soldiers that they should kill themselves for the state, that they shouldn't run from gunfire to preserve their lives, but to align themselves with the causes and the ideas of the state, and being willing to take orders from, someone else, and they're just a dog. You go and you shoot and kill someone else for this idea, for a flag, for a politician who you've never met, to gain some other poor person's resources. And if you're not, on the battlefield in the front line, then you're an engineer and you're making the bombs, or you're a person feeding, GMO poisons to somebody else. It's just this kind of manufactured allegiance to blind consumerism and blind obedience. And breaking out of that is really difficult because people think they don't necessarily know. They've been subjected to this all of their lives, and they wonder why they're unhappy. They wonder. They're just like,
there has been there's been a deliberate focus on making Americans scared of, okay? And fill in the blank. Most of the time it's scared of black people. And somebody's going to listen to this podcast and go, oh, that William, he is nothing but a racist crazy man. But but you know what? If they pay attention, they will learn something. But here's what happened. In 2008, the country elected a half-black man to be president. Okay, and you have this whole contingent of people out there, and I apologize for getting on my high horse, but I really would like to say this, if you don't mind.
Trot on.
The country elected a half-black man to be president of the United States. They elected him over a white man. Okay, this black man, because if you have a drop of black in you, if you're black, see, that backfired on white folks right there. But the fact of the matter is, this black man was the best man in the entire United States of America for the job of being president. And what that did in one stroke was it gave lie to the notion, to the fiction, to the ongoing belief of white exceptionalism. Okay? And that was intolerable. That was intolerable to a vast number of people. Look how racist people have been since he's been elected. And that's you've got the people who are still pissed that the South lost, okay? And they're very upset because what this election has done is that it has said that there is no difference. As a matter of fact, not as that there's no difference, but that here we have a black man, visibly better than twice all the white men in America to be president. And that, you look at how people are, you've got your double wide trailer group all upset because A&E fired this bearded guy who looks like whatever that band is. And you have all of this going on, and essentially what has happened is, education has become for the elite, and not the elite in terms of money, but the elite in terms of white money. And so, they pull money out of public schools, claiming that, well, we're going to put this money into charter schools. We're going to do vouchers, which is, patently illegal in terms of the U.S. Constitution. You can't take tax money and put it into private schools, but they want to do that because what they want to do is they want a dumbed-down populace. Okay, they want dumb people. They want people who don't pay attention. They want scared people. They've scared white people in this country so bad that every single one of them has to have a bunch of guns. And I'm not saying anything that anybody doesn't know, and I'm certainly not saying anything that I can't back up. And so what we've done is we've made this a very unpleasant place, a very dumbed-down place, and we're supposed to raise healthy children out of this. It's hard to imagine how that can be done.
I think that the racial fires are constantly being stoked. And much like we were saying before, we need to hold everyone accountable for the things that they create. I feel like Obama is a president like every other president. And people will say what they will about him. I think that, when he was elected, I cried. I was just like, yes, finally. And I think there was just sort of we had Bush, there was the false flag of 9/11. We have all of these fear, war. Everybody's kind of tired of it. Terrorists, take away your freedoms, pushed on us. And then, it's like, all right, finally, yes. And then, unfortunately, Obama is just doing what every other president has done.
Well, it's
manufacture fear.
Yeah, but it's impossible to create. No, you're right, but it's impossible to create wholesale change in this country because the inertia is so high. The inertia is so hard to overcome. And if we were to be entirely honest, the people who run this country have nothing to do with the government.
Oh, okay? Yeah, of course.
The people who run this country, the people who run this country would prefer that your children and my children, work at Target, Walmart, wherever, for minimum wage, no benefits, and to shut the hell up.
Right,
and
exactly.
That's something that we shouldn't be sitting still for. But it's tough to get traction. It's tough when your pension has been taken away. It's tough when they make it so hard for you to keep your job that you have to shut the hell up and not say anything because if you lose your job, you're 2 months from being homeless. It's tough to have a country that can take care of itself when you have taken every opportunity that country used to provide and sold it away or stolen it away. So
that's why it's so important for people to create, just like they have to create their own stories, they have to start creating their own businesses. Because relying on the government to be your surrogate parent, we're all locked in different ways. But starting with the public school indoctrination and just this sort of processing that happens where people feel like, oh, well, I need someone to tell me how to govern my life. I need someone else to lead over me, take my money, overspend it, and then put the bill on me and then still not give me what I need. Cut the art from schools. Like, why do we need these things? It's a toxic relationship. And so learning how to self-organize, like look at Detroit, man. It's completely decimated. And the people there have said, yeah, well, we're going to take over these spaces. We're going to have community gardens. We're governing ourselves. We're going to teach.
Right.
We're going to, and that's what I feel that art does. Art is one of those things that inspires people in song, in music, in song, in art, in different visual means to enable people and remind them of their own power. And so that's what I hope to kind of repush, like, because people are so PC now. They don't want to question anyone. They don't want to insult anyone. They don't want to point out something obvious. Like, yes, it is fantastic. I totally understand how amazing it is to see a black president. Believe me, I do. At the same time, he just passed NDAA. He pushed forth NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, enabling the United States military to arrest any citizen of the world without representation. Indefinite.
And due process, without due process, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So holding Obama accountable like you would any other president, to me, would be fair and equal and starting to level the playing field.
Right.
And then also saying, okay, well, what do I do to liberate myself? How do I start making more conscious decisions? Do I even know my neighbor? Going outside of your comfort zone in both art and your life and the parameters of your thinking, I think will really start to bring about a new renaissance, because it's in dire need. Like the system that we have currently is draining us of everything, of our humanity. And it's time we start taking that back.
And the last word, because we're just about out of time, is art can foment revolution. Because through art you can capture people's minds.
Absolutely.
Let me do this tie up here. I want to thank everybody who listened.
Thanks, guys.
I especially want to thank you for being here, because you made the show very, very easy for me. For those who are listening, be sure to let people know that this show is live every Friday night at 9 Eastern Time, and that every show is available as a podcast. I guess we're going back over a year now, a year's worth of shows on the site, so you can, if you've missed something, you can check it out. So I want to thank you for being here, and people posted
Thanks for letting me rattle on.
Well, that's okay. Let people know where you're going to be, what's going on with Top Cow, what's going on with the Dr. Fu's lab. All of the things that you do. Keep people posted, because you know what? That's also an easy way for people to find ways to support the people, the creatives that we have.
Thank you, and I want to do the same for others as well.
Yeah. And as we're just a few minutes over here, I'm going to turn it over to the skipper. Jarvis, what do you have for us tonight?
Oh, I'm just keep it short and sweet. Thank you, Afua, for coming tonight. It was very enlightening having you on. I loved every minute of it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, everyone for sharing the information about the show tonight with others. Oh, and I want to encourage everyone to post stuff in your Black Science Fiction Society site, pictures, videos, and events to let us know what you're doing and the things that you've already done, so that we can support you on it as a group. We have like 3,500, a little over 3,500 members, and we can send your information out to everybody and share that with them.
Thank you so much.
Yes, it's been great. And that's it for me. I just want to continue to thank everybody for the support that you've shown us over the course of this year that we've done the show, and look forward to doing it for many years in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, guys, for listening.
Well, thank you, everybody, and we're gonna call it a night tonight. Hang on for a second. We'll talk as soon as we're done with the recording. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for showing up, and we'll be back next Friday live. Have a good evening.
Awesome. Take care.
Good night.
Take care.
Good night.
Take care.
Good night.
care.
Good night.
Take 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 care.
Good night.